things in order here so we can get started. Okay, that. And then we're gonna do this. Okay. Okay, so let's dive back into the diagramming, since this has been the thing you've been waiting for all week, is to talk about English grammar. So I want to meet your needs and expectations, your desires for English grammar today. And we're continuing on really focusing on these phrases and clauses that are found within a sentence. And I thought I would try to represent this a little more visually in talking about these connector words that we've been discussing for the last several weeks. And that as you look at the sentence, right, I try to represent it here more visually. It's made up of the independent clause and then often several other dependent clauses or phrases. And those other clauses and phrases are typically introduced by a connector word. I note it here as the CW, connector word. And again, those connector words are what we've been focusing our attention on, because if you understand the connector words, then that tells you a lot about how that clause or phrase that they are introducing, the connector word will tell you a lot about how that phrase or clause is functioning within the sentence, whether it's what it's modifying and how it's modifying it. And so that's why I've really been having us slow down and stop and really give attention to these particular connector words. They are really key in helping us understand the structure of the sentence. So as we move toward diagramming, if you can understand these connector words, that'll help you a lot in trying to figure out, okay, where does this phrase go? What's it modifying? How does it connect? All right. That's why I call them connector words, because they have a role of connecting, much like I think we talked about before, bricks. You know, if you think of bricks that are built into a wall, that those bricks are held together and connected by the mortar between them, right? The concrete, the cement, or you can think of I don't know if I probably shouldn't use this illustration since we have a doctor in our presence, but just sort of the vessels that connect between particular organs or bring nutrients to particular organs in the body. You know, the connector words are those links, and those words themselves really help us understand how these different things are linked together. All right, just like I said, mortar between the bricks. So we focused our attention on the 4 connector words that are used in English and also, by the way, in Greek. It's the same kind of principle that functions in Greek. In Greek, we also have clauses and phrases which are introduced by these connector words. And so these connector words, the first group that we've spent our time on is the conjunctions, right? And they join clauses, phrases, or words together. And we've discussed the 2 types. The coordinating, which joins parts of a sentence that are grammatically equal, whether they be 2 independent clauses, 2 dependent clauses, 2 words, 2 phrases. They coordinate, and we remember those coordinating conjunctions. How, Pastor Jason? Since you are the original fanboy that we did away with your group last week, we talked about now just and boy. What are the coordinating conjunctions? Can you tell us the 5?
And, nor, but, or, and yet.
Excellent. Very good. Those 5 really are the coordinating conjunctions. So when we look at conjunctions in a paragraph or in a sentence, we look first, are they coordinating? If they're coordinating, that tells us something about what they're joining together. It tells us that what they're joining together are equal grammatically. All right. Now, that's key, because if they are not a coordinating conjunction, there's only one other type of conjunction. It's called a subordinating conjunction. And that tells us that what it's joining to the sentence is subordinate, that the clause that it's joining is subordinate to some other clause. Therefore, and this is the key word, when you think of subordinate conjunctions, think of dependent clauses. All right. That's why we've been focusing so much time, and there's a lot of subordinating, you know, although, so then, therefore, because, for, so, in order that, for this reason. These are just some examples. Since, if, okay. Now, these are all examples of subordinating conjunctions, and we know if we find a subordinating conjunction, we know this. If we have a subordinating conjunction, and then plus, say, we know what's going to follow it is going to be a dependent clause. All right? We know that because it's a subordinating conjunction. If we have a coordinating conjunction like and, or but, or yet, or nor, then we know that what it's joining could be either an independent clause, a dependent clause, a phrase, or a word. All right? But a subordinating conjunction, it by definition will be introducing a dependent clause. This is why I've been spending a lot of time talking about this, because just knowing the kind of conjunction already tells you a lot about the sentence. So for example, if I have a coordinating conjunction such as my feet were cold and I put on my shoes. Okay, what kind of conjunction do we have here? Well, it's one of the and boy, so it's coordinating, right? So that tells me something automatically. What it tells me is that what follows the coordinating conjunction is the same grammatically as what came before. And in this case, what comes before? My feet were cold. Pastor Renee, what do we call that? Is it a clause or a phrase? My feet were cold.
It's a clause.
And what kind of clause?
It is an independent clause, Pastor.
Excellent. So I have an independent clause before my coordinating conjunction. What does that tell me about what is it comes after the coordinating conjunction? Will it be what will it be?
It also another independent clause.
Exactly, because it's connected by a coordinating conjunction. So I put on my shoes is also independent, meaning it is a complete thought. So here we're given two complete thoughts here. My feet were cold and I put on my shoes. Now, let's change this to a subordinating conjunction. My feet were cold, so I put on my shoes. Now, what's changed here, Renee? In this second sentence.
The second sentence becomes an independent clause.
Okay.
Sorry, become a dependent clause.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's what I thought that's what you meant. And why? So this is now a dependent clause, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let me note that. My feet were cold is still an independent clause. Nothing has changed there. But yes, I know that I put on my shoes is now a dependent clause. Why?
Because it becomes the reason why it becomes the result of the first independent clause.
Yeah, and how do I know that? How do I know this is the result or the reason?
Because of the word so.
Exactly. So is a subordinating conjunction. How do I know that? Because so is not an and boy. All right? It's subordinating, and that means this, that it comes under my feet were cold, so reason I put on my shoes. It's answering the question why. Why did I put on my shoes? Because my feet were cold. So here, just by knowing the type of conjunction tells me how the author intends for these two clauses to work together. In the first example, because he uses a coordinating conjunction, that tells us the author is intending to give us two independent, equal statements. Let me tell you, brothers, my feet were cold. And I also want to tell you, brothers, I put on my shoes. So I'm declaring two equal statements. But in the second example, I want to emphasize something different. My feet were cold, so, brothers, because my feet were cold, I put on my shoes. So in that second sentence, I have changed how I am presenting you the information by using a different conjunction. Okay? And this is why it's important to be able to identify what kind of conjunction we're working with. If it's coordinating, then I know the author's intending to present these two words, phrases, or clauses together as equal counterparts or equal together. But if I'm using a subordinating conjunction, I know two things. One is that I know what follows it will be a dependent clause. Let me just write this out. If I am using automatically, by just knowing that subordinating conjunction, it tells me two things. The words which follow the conjunction are a dependent clause. Okay, that is by definition. Subordinating conjunctions introduce dependent clauses. And the second thing that it tells me is because it's a dependent clause, is that the I lost my train of thought. What was the second thing? It's a dependent clause, and also then it's subordinate. Because it's a dependent clause, it's subordinate to the word it modifies. Okay? So in this case, my feet were cold, so subordinate. This is now a dependent clause that is modifying something in the independent clause, and that is the verb were. My feet were cold, so because they were cold, I put on my shoes. All right? Any questions on this? This is supposed to be review, but I wanted to reinforce this because the power of understanding these connector words tells us how they're functioning and gives us a lot of information about what to do with the sentence. So what follows the connector word, in this case with a subordinating conjunction, is a dependent clause. Okay? Any comments or questions? Are you with me on this? Make sense? Hopefully it's a review. So the conjunctions are the first type of connector. Let's just review here. Let me get my glasses on. Okay. All right, there we go. Okay, so I think we've looked at this verse before, but I want to just start looking at a few passages, and we'll start with this verse just to warm us up. So Tabs, let me have you just simply identify the conjunctions here and tell me what kind of conjunction it is, okay?
Ephesians 2, verse 19. So then, you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and are of God's household. The conjunctions are the words so and so in the beginning, and then the and in the strangers and aliens, and the but in but you are fellow citizens with the saints, and the last and are of God's household. The first conjunction is a subordinating conjunction because I think it is related to what was previously said. It is gives a reason for what follows, and then the next are coordinating conjunctions. The and aliens is coordinating, but is coordinating, and are of God's household is a coordinating conjunction.
Okay, good. The only thing I would modify is actually the first conjunction is so then.
Ah, okay. Yes, Pastor.
Whoops. All right.
Okay, Pastor.
Sometimes the conjunctions are two words, not just one.
Okay.
Okay, good. Excellent. So then, you're no longer strangers, aliens. And now what's the process to figure this out? First, we start with and boy. Do I see any and boy in the sentence? And you've picked those and, but, and. And then any other conjunctions that are here are going to be subordinate. And the only other one in this verse is so then. Now, let's say that you weren't sure. You go, okay, I got and boy. I see that. I see this and, I see this but, I see this and. Now, so then, I can't remember. Is that a conjunction? Is it a preposition? What is it? I don't remember. Well, or I'm not sure. Here's something that can help you. What follows this so then? Tabs, I'll just stay with you since. What follows so then here?
I think it follows an independent clause.
Hold on a second. Is a conjunction. Yes, I have a clause following it, don't I?
Clause. Yes, yes.
And in this case, yes, it's independent. But I'm just typing this out. So check to see if there is a clause which follows. If so, then it is a conjunction. All right? Because we're going to talk about prepositions in a little bit. Prepositions, what follows prepositions, what follows a preposition is a noun. All right? So this is how you can tell. If there had been a noun here, like so then the men and aliens are fellow citizens or something like that, you would know it's a preposition. But because there's a clause, meaning there's a subject and a verb, and in this case an object, that tells me that it is a conjunction. Okay? Because as we're going to look further, let me remind you, okay, these are the connector words. Conjunction, preposition. Tabs, what are the other two? Do you remember? We haven't covered them yet, but let me test your memory.
The punctuation marks, Pastor, are one.
Okay, and those aren't really connector words. That's but that's a way we can see connections. But there's 4 connector words, 4 categories. Remember the other 2? I mentioned them right at the beginning.
What was the other 2? I forgot, Pastor. Sorry.
No problem. Relative pronouns.
Relative, yes.
And starts with a P.
Personal pronouns.
No. Good guess.
No.
Participles.
Participles. There you go.
Participles. Okay, thank you, Pastor.
Okay. So what's interesting is conjunctions are followed by a clause, subordinating conjunctions. Prepositions are followed by a noun. Relative pronouns are followed by a dependent clause. Participles are followed by a noun. It's usually the object of the participle. That's a general pattern that you're going to see in English. All right. Now, punctuation marks, those can be followed by anything. So we're not going to deal with those. But as far as the connector words goes, you can kind of remember a conjunction, especially a subordinating conjunction, are followed by a clause. Coordinating can be followed by a clause, a phrase, or a word. So they're a little more tricky, but that's okay. Do you know why? Because with coordinating clauses, there's only 5. So we know what they are. So we know what the coordinating clause is, right? Because what's and boy? All right. So memorize and boy. And then you'll know the coordinating clauses. What this helps you with is the subordinating conjunction. The subordinating conjunction, those are followed by a clause. Okay? Coordinating conjunction can be a clause, phrase, or word, but you know what? We don't have to guess if it's coordinating or not because we already know by definition the coordinating conjunctions. And, nor, but, or, yet. All right? So what I'm talking about is if you're in the sentence like up here and you're wondering, okay, so then I think that's a conjunction. And you don't have your list. And of course, you know, we don't memorize all the conjunctions. There's too many. But I'm just trying to give you a little hint as to how would you know if it's a conjunction or if it's a preposition. Well, just look at what follows. If what follows is a clause, I've got a subordinating conjunction. Because I've already eliminated and boy. I've already eliminated the coordinating conjunctions as a possibility. So right? Because I've already seen. I know those. I memorized them. Just like tabs, picked them up right away. And, but, and. So what I'm just trying to show you now is if you have any question about so then, if it's a preposition or a conjunction. All right? Are there any questions on this? So what I'm trying to do is just help you identify whether or not this word's a conjunction, and because this is going to help us later when we get to prepositions and trying to figure out how those work. All right. Okay, let's pick up another. So here's the diagram. So then, and this, as Tab said, this is subordinating conjunction. And if you remember a couple weeks ago, we discussed how sometimes a sentence can begin with a coordinating or subordinating conjunction. And if it does, it's making a connection to a verse, a sentence, a paragraph, or a section before. And so this particular so then connects with verses 11 to 18. And this is from Ephesians 2. All right. So by knowing the context, we can identify that. And if you don't remember that discussion or weren't part of it, go back, I think, 2 sessions. And I spend a lot of time on conjunctions that begin a sentence and how they are significant to giving us the context. All right. So if they begin a sentence, they're not connecting a dependent clause to an independent clause. What they're doing is they're connecting what follows with what came before. And so in this case, it's a subordinate clause, meaning that this verse and the ones that follow are subordinate to verses 11 to 18. Because of verses 11, 18, so then the result is you're no longer strangers and aliens. In verses 11 and 18, the discussion there was you were formerly separate from God, but now you're brought near in Christ. Formerly you were an alien and a stranger, not even part of Israel. Now you are now you're fellow citizens with the saints. So this paragraph introduced by so then is subordinate to the paragraph that came before. All right. But within the paragraph, it begins with the independent clause, you're no longer strangers. And then, but, so this is, again, coordinating. So it's equal to, grammatically equal to, you're no longer strangers. That means that it's introducing or coordinating another independent clause. How do I know that? Because it's coordinating with this clause, which is an independent clause. Well, how do I know that? Because but is a coordinating conjunction. Therefore, it connects, it joins two series of words that are grammatically equal. Okay, so if I'm diagramming, this is point number one, or if I'm making an outline, this is point number one. This is point two, and this and here also is it's coordinating another independent clause. So I have three independent clauses here given. So then, and knowing the context, right away I can say the result of God's work in Christ is that we are, one, no longer strangers and aliens. And you can explain what that means. Two, we are fellow citizens with the saints, meaning all one in Christ, Jew and Gentile. Three, we are not only citizens, we are of God's household, part of God's family. So these, if you're preaching this text, you're going to have three results of God's work in Christ, or something like that. All right, and I know this, I get this within 5 minutes because, well, longer, I'm exaggerating, but if I have the diagram, I'm already understanding that I've got three equivalent statements by the author here. How do I know they're equivalent? Because they're joined by coordinating conjunctions. And they're introduced by a subordinating conjunction, which tells me that these three results, because so then is a result, these three results, they're the result of what he said earlier. And by studying the book, I know that it's verses 11 to 18 that it's in reference to. And again, go back a couple weeks where I went through the first half of Ephesians and showed you how the sections were connected. Chapter 1, verses 3 to 14, and then how chapter 1, verses 15 to 23 are subordinate to that. And then chapter 2, he introduces another section that's coordinate to the first. And so you can go back and listen to that. But here, just by understanding, all I've done is focused on the conjunctions in this verse. And it's given me a lot of insight into how Paul has structured and what he is focusing on, and he's making three equivalent points. Okay? Comments, questions? Let me know here. Is this making sense? If not, ask a question. I want to make sure I just want to make sure you men are understanding or grasping the power of just knowing what the connector word is and how it works. Okay? The grammar here is a very good friend to us because just knowing, and like I said, in Greek, these particular conjunctions are exactly as we would understand them in English. He introduces this verse with the, let me see, I'll just look up the actual conjunction just so that I am not being inaccurate. Ephesians 2:19. Yeah, araun. So it's so then, okay? Consequently, therefore, is the idea. So it's exactly as the English translation here represents it correctly, and then we go to but, the coordinating conjunction that at the end of the verse is He uses kai here. So it can have, so probably the better translation might be and, but in Greek, it is a coordinating conjunction. Kai is a coordinating conjunction. And then in verse, when he says, and you're of God's household, it's again kai, coordinating conjunction. Oh, I'm sorry. I misread. Allah is but. It is but. He used but. So for this conjunction, he used Allah, which is but in Greek, and it's coordinating conjunction, strong adversative. And then he used the word kai for this next conjunction. That is also coordinating conjunction. So these English conjunctions match the Greek in the sense that both coordinating and subordinating. All right. So just by knowing the conjunctions, I can see in this verse anyway, the structure right away. And really, I've got my outline. So I'm ready to preach now, right? No, we got a lot more work to do. But the diagram is a key tool because, and the diagram can be a key tool if I grasp how these connector words work. Okay. Now you'll notice in this particular passage, we do have a preposition here with, okay, that introduces, and notice what follows the preposition? A noun. Not a clause, but a noun. And it's connecting this noun to something else. And in this case, it's connecting this noun to citizens. What kind of citizens? Your fellow citizens, fellow with the saints. Okay? So that's another little piece to this. Now, what's interesting is, we'll deal with that later. Let's go on to another passage. Are there any questions on this one? All right. Pastor Manny, we'll give you the next one. Go ahead and read it, and then just tell us the conjunctions and what kind they are.
2 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 4 to 5. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day would overtake you like a thief. For you are all sons of light and sons of day. We are not of night nor of darkness. Conjunctions are but.
All right. And go ahead and tell me as you find them what kind it is.
But is a part of the envoy, so it's a coordinating conjunction.
Okay, good.
That.
Ah, good. How did you know that was a conjunction? Is a conjunction?
It connects. It connects the previous clause from the next.
Yeah, because what follows it is a clause, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, yeah. So it's the conjunction here. Now, what kind of conjunction is it?
It is subordinating.
How do you know that?
Because it's not among the envoy group.
Exactly. Okay, good. Are there any more conjunctions that you see here?
In verse 5, it's for.
Good.
And it is a subordinating conjunction.
Correct.
Next conjunction is and, also in verse 5. And
Okay. And what kind is that one?
is a coordinating conjunction.
Right, it's an and boy.
More.
Good. And what kind is that?
Nor is a coordinating conjunction.
Good, because it's an and boy.
It is there any more? I think that's it, Pastor Tim.
Okay, good. Now, technically, we'll come back to that. All right, so, yeah, you caught them all.
You, Pastor Tim, are you going to point out the correlative conjunctions?
Well, you tell me. Do you see a correlative conjunction?
Not and nor go together.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to save the correlative for later. We have talked about it already, but we do have this correlative. Remember, correlative conjunctions were basically just a pair of words that form a conjunction, that is, that join together. And the most common, we have both and, either or, neither nor, if then, rather than, and in this case, not nor. There are several others. The question is, okay, so with a correlative conjunction, as I mentioned before, they either are going to function like a subordinating or coordinating conjunction. Okay, how do we know which? So, for example, this not nor that we see here, how do you think it's functioning, Pastor Manny, as a subordinating or coordinating conjunction?
I think they're grammatically equal, Pastor Tim, so it's coordinating.
Yes, it's coordinating. Excellent. One, they're grammatically equal, but also, two, the word nor is a coordinating conjunction. So if you notice, men, notice each of these, and I could have put the whole list of correlatives, but each of them have a conjunction in the with the other word. So both is not a conjunction, but and is. Either is not a conjunction, but or is. Now together they form a conjunction, but in each case the conjunction tells you what kind this is. So both and is going to be coordinating because the word and is in it. Either or will be coordinating because the word or is in it. So and boy will always guide you in this process. If then is going to be subordinate. How do I know? Because if is a subordinating conjunction. Rather than is going to be subordinate. How do I know? Because than is a subordinating conjunction.
Thank you, Pastor Tim. Very helpful, Pastor Tim.
Okay, so the and boy is really, really powerful. Okay, because it'll tell you, even with these tricky ones, these correlatives where we have another word that sneaks in. He's kind of like a correlative conjunction is kind of like a guy that's trying to get into a party and he's not invited. So what he does is he finds a friend who is invited and tags along. And so and is a conjunction. So both here in this both wants to get to the party. So he goes with his friend and, who's a conjunction, and not nor. It's the same thing. Nor is invited. He's a conjunction, but not is not. So he tries to sneak in with nor. So, but it's coordinating because nor is coordinating. So, like I said, don't be concerned, or if you see if you have a correlative conjunction where it's it's a pair. Now what is this? Is this, well, that the word, there's one of the words in the pair will be a conjunction, and so you can tell if it's coordinating or subordinating by what that word is. So, and then also, as Manny pointed out, we are of night, we are of darkness. All right, those are the two grammatically equal statements that this conjunction is connecting. So what would this look like in a, and before I get there, the other thing that I thought was really good, Manny, was how you identified that as a conjunction because you saw there was a clause that followed it. Okay, now first,
Sir Tim,
yeah,
the conjunction for in verse 5 is a subordinating.
oh, you're right, my mistake. Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's not an and boy, so it's subordinating. Okay. All right, so a few things we learn here. That is a subordinating conjunction because a clause follows it. All right, and then secondly, we had the not nor is a correlative conjunction functioning as a coordinating conjunction because of the word nor. Nor is an and boy. Okay, so those are the two key things that we see here. So let's see, what does this diagram look like? Okay, now again, we have we can get a lot of insight just by noting the conjunctions here. First, we have a conjunction but that's introducing the sentence. Okay, so that's telling us that we have this new sentence is coordinate with a previous sentence or verse or paragraph or section. We don't know without understanding the context. Now, if we study Thessalonians in context, we see that actually in this case it's coordinate with verse 3, with the verse right before, because the verse right before is talking about those who are in darkness. All right, but Paul's saying here, you are not in darkness. Let me shrink this so it fits on one. Okay, so again, when a conjunction introduces a sentence, it's telling us it's connecting it to a previous section or verse or sentence. And the kind of conjunction tells us how it's connecting that. In this case, it's coordinating. It's that contrastive but. So here in verse 4, he's contrasting with verse 3. Okay? Now you, brethren, are not in darkness. That's my independent clause. That, okay, now, Manny noted that this was a subordinating conjunction. So that tells us that the clause that follows it is independent or dependent. And Manny, since this is your verse, we'll let you answer that. The clause here, the day would overtake you, is that independent or dependent?
It is a dependent clause.
And how do I know that?
Because it cannot stand alone.
And how do I know that in this verse, that it doesn't stand alone? Again, think, my focus is on the conjunctions here. What kind of conjunction introduces this clause?
it is subordinate. By definition, subordinating conjunctions are subordinate to the one to a dependent clause.
Yes. Okay. So that tells us that in this case, the word that I know is a conjunction. How? Because a clause follows it. And then secondly, I know it's a subordinating conjunction. How? Because it's not an and boy. And so that tells me that the clause that follows it is dependent because it's introduced by a subordinating conjunction. And then the next step in the diagram is to figure out, okay, now what is it modifying? Okay, we'll go there later. It's modifying the word are, because it's giving us the reason here. You're not in darkness. Why? That the day would, or sorry, you're not in darkness. So that's not why, it's the result. You are not in darkness so that the day would overtake you. Okay. Now let's get to the next conjunction, for. Now I indented for here. Why? Is this clause, Manny, dependent or independent? You are all sons of light.
It is, Pastor Tim, it is dependent
And how do I know that?
because it is preceded by a subordinating conjunction.
Exactly. How do I know it's subordinating? Because it's not an and boy. Okay? And this conjunction for typically functions as a because. It gives a reason. Okay? You are not in darkness that the day would overtake you, because you're not in darkness because you are sons of light and sons of day. All right. Now that's skipping a step ahead to talk about, but what I want you to definitely see is that we know you are all sons of light is not a new independent thought. It is a dependent thought. It's a dependent statement. Why? Because it's introduced by a subordinating conjunction. So I know this you are all sons of light is modifying something here in the verse. Now my next step is to figure out what it's modifying, but at this point you at least know that it's modifying something. It's not a new, it doesn't come over here. It's not Paul is not making a second statement. He's not saying, you brethren are not in darkness, number one. Two, you are sons of light. He's not saying that. He's saying you're not in darkness, and then a subordinating conjunction because, or for, you're sons of light. That's why you're not in darkness, because you're sons of light. That's how it's functioning here. Okay? Now, we have this next sentence that there's no conjunction connecting this next sentence. We are not of night. So you have to figure out exegetically, how is it linked to this paragraph? Is it in parallel with you're not in darkness? Or is this clause intended to modify something inside here? We don't have a conjunction in this case that will tell us what's going on. So, the default is in to say, well, maybe this is a new thought. That this is point 2. This is point 1.
It looks like
What's that?
it looks like a contrastive parallel of you are all sons of light and sons of day, Pastor Tim.
Yeah. You are all sons of light and sons of day. What did I do here? Are you talking about what are you pointing out?
The verse 2 seems like a parallel of you are sons of light and sons of
Oh,
day,
okay.
but in a contrastive way.
So it could be like this, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a possibility. I haven't studied this passage in detail, so and that's what we would need to do, where the grammar is not helping us on this one because we don't know what Paul's initially, we don't know what his intent is. Is this a but here because he's contrasting your sons of light, or is it really like an and he's adding it to this first one? You're not in darkness, we are not at night. So that's something you'd have to try to figure out in the context and doing more effort. But that's probably the idea here. Would be my initial thought. I'm looking at the Greek text, and there's no conjunction there. So this is one of those cases where, the author doesn't always put conjunctions in to help us. Sometimes it's an implied conjunction. And we have to figure out in the context, what is the implied conjunction?
Yes, Pastor Tim, I previously mentioned, it's like the day parallels with night and the light parallels with dark. The light corresponds with darkness.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Akayasam even probably.
So it could be an and. So he's making a second point here. Yeah, that's a good, and that'd be the kind of thought process you would work through to try to figure out, where does this clause go? All right. So this is an example of, we're not always given a connector word, unfortunately. And we don't do that in our language, as we speak either. We don't have conjunctions between every single statement we make, right? Sometimes in the context of the conversation, if the person's speaking, if they're, how they're connecting additional phrases. But for the most part, we will have those connector words to help guide us in the process, all right? But this passage shows us that it's not always laid out for us very nicely. Like we had up here, this one, right, where we had, look at that, 3 clear outline points. Hallelujah, look at these conjunctions. I love conjunctions. They give me the outline in minutes. So we don't always get that. We love it when it happens, but it doesn't always happen. So in this passage, Paul wants us to work a little bit and figure out, okay, I got you up to here, Paul. I understand what you're doing, but I don't quite know what you're doing with down here with this, we are not of night. But Brother Harris started us down a path of thinking about, okay, I can see a contrast here. Sons of light, sons of day. We are not of night nor of darkness. He said up here, you are not in darkness. So maybe he's either reiterating that point as a second point, or it's part of what he's saying inside here. So that's for further study. But the diagram at least is forcing us to ask the question, okay, where does this guy go? And we don't have a connector word to help us on this one. Okay. So the takeaways here are that, again, we can identify conjunctions by seeing what follows. And that's how we figured out that the word that. And then a second one is, we are not always given conjunctions, or I'll just say connector words, for every clause or phrase, as we see from the example, we are not of night. Okay, so we have to do extra work to understand how that clause or phrase connects. Okay, but this is where, again, context will really help you, and looking for patterns and things like that. All right, let's move on to the next passage. Unless we have any questions here so far. Hopefully that makes sense. Nathan, we're at you now, so it's your turn to do this one, Jonathan. If you're still awake or the baby's sleeping, you want to
The
whisper?
baby will not take a bath.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, actually this is just the first time that I am now being familiar with the envoy and with the conjunctions. So we'll have a try.
Yeah, give it a try.
Yeah, okay.
So let me just, first thing I would say is look for envoy first as the first step. And then second step is other conjunctions. Look for those by finding, by looking for other clauses, okay? So try that process. She's helping you. Hey, you can't get help from anybody. You got to do this by yourself.
Okay, sorry. No soldier in
It's
active I'll first read it. Okay, no soldier in active service entangles himself in the affairs of everyday life, so that he may please the one who enlisted him as a soldier. So in verse 4, the conjunction is so that.
Okay, good. What kind is it?
So that it is a subordinating conjunction.
How do you know that?
It is not an envoy.
Yeah, that's right.
And at the same time, okay. So it is also preceded by an dependent clause. Okay, the conjunction is, wait, baby. I'm distracted. Okay, I think that's it in verse 4. In verse 5 also, if anyone competes as an athlete, he does not win the prize unless he competes according to the rules. Okay. Go ahead, baby. Okay. Also, if anyone competes as an athlete, he does not. Is unless a conjunction?
Well, let's first look. Do you see any envoy in this verse, in verse 5?
Also, go ahead, baby. Doon na muna ikaw sa labas. Doon na muna. Also, if anyone competes with an envoy, and
yeah, envoy is
nor, but yet,
and then the O is or.
It's a bit difficult to being absent for so long.
That's okay. No problem. So and, nor, but, or, yet.
Okay.
So do you see any of those here?
My children are now all awake.
Do you need to, can you still do this, or do you need to?
Please excuse me for a while.
Okay, no problem. Harris, can you pick up
Thank you.
for him? No problem.
No. Yes, Pastor.
In verse 5, we're looking, are there any more conjunctions in verse 5?
Also.
Okay. Now what kind is that?
Subordinating.
It's coordinating, but it's not an envoy.
Yeah. It's not an envoy.
So is it?
It functions like an and, or at the same time.
Yes. In English, sometimes also is the same as and. But honestly, the translation here, it's the word kai. So they should have just translated it as and.
And
In fact, let me see what yeah, the New King James translated it as and. The NIV translated it as where is it? Oh, as a but, okay, because of the day, okay. ESV translated it as oh, it didn't even put in the conjunction there. Wow. And then NAS put also. So the New King James actually did this correctly. It says, and if anyone competes as an athlete. Okay, so like I said, there's always a little twist here and there at times. When you see the word also, the problem I have with this, if I can take an aside for a minute, is this word also. Okay, in English, it can act like and sometimes, but it also can act like an adverb to, right? In addition to. I also like durian. Okay? You could say, I also like durian. Now here, it's not functioning like a conjunction. It's not I and like durian. It's functioning like an adverb. I too like durian. Okay? So that word also is a little tricky. And they really, because they use the word kai here, it's really a conjunction. They should have translated, the NAS should have translated this as and, which we know is coordinating. Now the question is, how would you see that? How would we know this? Harris, I'll start with you since you inherited this passage from Jonathan, and you don't have any kids running around, so you don't have that excuse. So you have to answer it. But how would we know that this word also is a conjunction here? And how would we know that it's a coordinating conjunction? What do you think?
Yeah, Pastor Tim, it is followed by a clause. So it is a conjunction.
Okay. Well, but we have this word if in between.
Yeah.
So it's not directly followed by a clause.
Yeah. Can we have also if as part of the as a conjunction? Also if.
Okay. Is also if a conjunction. Well, that's a good question. Any thoughts from you guys? Also if anyone competes as an athlete.
Maybe the if functions as a, what's that again? It's followed by a noun. So I think it's a, what's that?
Well, we've got, it's followed by this,
A noun, anyone.
these words here, right? Before we get to the next divider, which is that comma in this case. So what follows if is this clause. You guys see that? Anyone competes as an athlete. So that tells me that if is a conjunction. And I know what kind of conjunction is it?
It's subordinating.
It's subordinating because it's not an and boy.
And boy. Yeah.
So that part I think makes a little sense. All right. If anyone competes as an athlete, Okay, that's a clause. It's following this word if. So if is either a relative pronoun or it's a conjunction. Well, I know it's not a relative pronoun because I memorized that list. That's who, whom, which, that. But so the if must be a subordinating conjunction, and it must be subordinating because it's not an amboy. I'm still got the problem of this word also here. So is also if a combined subordinating conjunction? Or is it two separate conjunctions? Ah, I hate
Maybe
English. Ah, kill me now. English is horrible. I want to.
Correlative, Pastor?
Well, that's the no, right? We're see what the translator did. They messed us up. They're really confusing us here. Yeah, because we could have is also if a conjunction. Is it correlative? You know what do I do with this word also? It's messing me up. I think hopefully if makes sense, I think, right? That process that we can see the word if is a subordinating conjunction. Based on the fact that what follows it is a clause and in addition, if is not a relative pronoun. All right? Because if as I told you guys before, these four connector words, if it's followed by a clause, then it's subordinating conjunction. If it's not coordinating, right? If it's not amboy, then I know it's a subordinating conjunction. Or it's a relative pronoun. Okay, those are my two options. If it's followed by a noun, then it's either a preposition or a participle. Now, so we looked at if anyone competes as an athlete, that's my subject's anyone, my verb's competes. So I know that this word if is a subordinating conjunction. What I don't know is how this also fits in. Is it a conjunction? Does it mean two? Is also if a conjunction together? Tabs,
If we will consider, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Ethan.
Sorry, Tabs.
No, it was you. I heard a voice, but I didn't know who it was. It was you.
Okay. If we will consider the context, Paul is making an analogy here. The verse is the soldier, and then verse 5 is the transition. After he make an analogy of a soldier, is now making in verse 5 an analogy of an athlete, and the transition is the word also.
Yes. So what does that feel like? Like, what does it seem like it's doing there?
And it seems that this is, he is placing those two analogy in equal footing, being a soldier and being an athlete. So also is, it functions as if and, or an boy, or coordinating conjunction, seems.
Yeah, it seems to be coordinating those. So that's helpful to see it sort of in context. And it's beginning the sentence. So it seems like this, if anyone competes as an athlete, is sort of an analogy, a comparable analogy to no soldier in active service. So also it seems to be connecting them together in a coordinating fashion. So it's really like functioning almost like an and. And if anyone competes as an athlete, he does not win the prize. So let's see what's going on here. Let me just throw you the diagram so we can kind of. All right, I think the first verse is fairly, no soldier entangles himself. That's the main independent clause. Soldier's my subject. Entangles is my verb. No soldier entangles himself. So that, there's my conjunction, and I know it's subordinating because he may please the one is a dependent clause. How do I know it's dependent? Because it's introduced by subordinating conjunction, so that tells me it's modifying something above it. And here I think it's telling us why no soldier entangles himself. Why? So that he may please the one who enlisted him. Now we get to verse 5, and from what Athan just said, this seems to be okay, based on the fact, one, it begins the sentence, and two, it seems to be connecting the analogies of soldier and athlete. Is that what you were saying, Jonathan?
It's Pastor Tim.
Okay. All right. So that's, I think, a good
This is your last assignment to me in our
I think that's a
in
good
our sermon.
Yeah. Oh, it was? Yeah. Oh, you had this passage? Oh, that's funny. That's right. Okay. So the question is, okay, I think this is good reasoning. Do we have anything else that would help guide us to know if this is a correct understanding?
Pastor Tim,
Yeah.
I would, if I may add to Pastor Athan, I would agree with him because here in the passage, Apostle Paul gives three examples: one of a soldier, another of an athlete, and another of a farmer. And I think they are in equal in terms of their standing in the passage. I think they are equal, so that also would function as an end to to uh, to say that these passages I think would be on the same on the same level.
Yeah.
Would be
That's a good
diagram
point.
them.
That's a good point. So now you guys you're making arguments from sort of what seems to fit the context, and that's good. That's good. That's what we like in the last verse, when we were talking about we are not of night, and how that fits. We're going to end up needing to look at we didn't have a conjunction to help us know how it connects, so we were trying to identify other reasons exegetically from the context which would support how it fits. And that's what you're doing here, and that's good. That's what we need to do when we've exhausted all of the grammatical possibilities. We need to consider what are some of the other what other things would contribute to that. There is one more thing we can do grammatically that can help us know. Okay? And that is one, to confirm grammatically if also is acting like a conjunction here. We can do two things. One, look at other translations. And again, the New King James Version had and. The ESV had nothing. And the NIV actually had rather. So that tells me something. That tells me, okay, I need to look at the interlinear here. Is there any help that's going to be given to me from the interlinear? So let's do that. Let me try to pull up Bible Hub. Let's see if I got enough bandwidth here. Okay, bro, let me, what am I doing here? Okay, let me share this screen. All right, now did I mention to you guys this Bible Hub has an app for the iPhone? Did I already tell you guys that? Yeah. Have any of you tried it? It really is fast compared to.
Yes, Pastor. I have it on my phone. Yeah.
Okay, good. So you guys do pay attention to me sometimes. Well, I appreciate that. All right, let's look up, because it's a lot slower when you go through the Wi-Fi or internet. Oh, this was 2 Timothy, wasn't it? All right, 2 Timothy.
It also works well on the tablet, Pastor.
Yeah, good. I haven't tried it on there.
Using it also.
So you guys will know, you'll get there before I will. So 2 Timothy 2, interlinear. The chapter. Okay, do all you guys see the the interlinear here? Okay. So I'm going to go to verses 4 and 5. That's my Now notice here in the Greek, I'm down here. Okay, verse 5. What do we see here? Conjunction, conjunction, conjunction. That's an interesting construction. Typically, and here's the challenge. So Kai is there, right? Our old buddy Kai, which we know usually is translated as and. This one here is translated if, it's conditional. And then det is usually translated as but, sometimes and sometimes now. So notice here, the interlinear guys, their translation was if now also. So this is an interpretive issue that even the interlinear gives us maybe some clue that Kai might be and, the coordinating idea. And in Greek, that's how Kai functions, as a coordinating conjunction. Now, det also functions that way. If is a subordinating conjunction. So I think the best I would say is grammatically, we do have indication that from the interlinear that, you know, I think the idea of and the New King James translation, which, let me take you there. All right, now you should see my my Logos app. Let's go to the New King James. Do you guys see? You see it there? That's how the New King James does it. And also, if anyone. That's probably the closest to how I would see that with those three conjunctions. Okay? That it's a coordinating idea, and like as Harris and Nathan said, but I think the Greek, the grammar does support it. There is a conjunction there, can be translated as and. All right, so what does that mean for, I mean, hopefully this is not just confusing you guys, but hopefully it's making a little bit of sense. So what does that mean here? Well, I think it's this. I think also, the word also is representing a coordinating conjunction. Really, I think and is a better translation that the New King James supports. And here's the sentence, the main sentence, again, it's coordinating, so I know this is an independent clause. How do I know that? Well, I confirmed that there's a coordinating conjunction that begins the verse, and therefore it's coordinating with verse 4. And in verse 4, no soldier entangles himself. That's Paul's first point. The second point, and he does not win the prize, is the second independent clause. Now notice this independent clause has a subordinating conjunction connected to it, and it gives the condition. He does not win the prize if anyone competes as an athlete. Now what does that mean? That would take some more work to try to interpret, but I'm just trying to show you grammatically. I know that if anyone competes is a subordinating, a dependent clause. So it's introduced by if, which is a subordinating conjunction. Therefore, it's coming under, it's modifying the main clause somehow, most likely. He does not win the prize. Okay? Now, if that doesn't make sense, it's okay. I'm just trying to give you example after example, and you'll see every verse sort of throws something new at us to have to figure out. But if you can get to the point where, at least with the conjunctions, you know if it's functioning as coordinating or subordinating, that'll tell you how what follows it, what it's doing, how it fits. Now, Athan asked is unless a conjunction, all right? He asked up here. Now, let me go back to you, Athan. How would you know? What would the process be to answer that question? Is unless a conjunction. What did we talk about a little earlier this morning? That how would you go about trying to answer that question, Jonathan?
From what you have mentioned, later we may consider translation. If are we to confirm?
Even before that, just with
okay.
the English text here, what could we do?
To identify the clause, if it is dependent or independent.
Yeah, first we ask, okay, what follows unless? And what follows it is he competes according to the rules, because my next separator, is that period. So I know this, okay, this is what follows it. So what does that tell me about unless?
It connects.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misspoke. There's a preposition here. But still, so what follows it immediately is he competes. Now, what is that? Is that a noun? Is it a clause? Is it a phrase? What is it?
It is a clause.
Exactly. So that means unless is either a conjunction or a relative pronoun. Right? The who, whom, which. All right. So I know it's not a relative pronoun, correct?
Yes.
So it must be. So unless must be a conjunction. Because it is not a relative pronoun. Okay? So if it's a conjunction, so we answer the question, yes, it's a conjunction. What kind of conjunction? Subordinate or coordinate?
Subordinate. It is not an envoy.
Because it is not envoy. All right? That's the process you can go through if you have a word you're not sure about. Okay?
Thank you, Pastor.
Now, this process doesn't work 100% of the time, but it'll work 90+%. All right? There are always in English, there's always problems. There's always sometimes something that doesn't quite fit. But I'm just trying to give you sort of generally, though, you can follow this procedure in your mind. All right? Okay, I come across a word. I'm not sure. Is this a conjunction? It seems like it, but I don't remember. I don't know. Well, let me see. What follows it? Okay, he competes. And I know it's just he competes because according to is a preposition. But even if I wasn't sure about that, I still know that I got a subject and a verb. I got a subject and verb following unless. So I know I've got a clause here. Okay? And so that tells me, it's a clause. All right? Then it must be a conjunction or relative pronoun. I memorize the relative pronoun list. And by the way, that's what I'm going to tell you to do later. When we do relative pronouns, this is what you should memorize. There's 3 groups of things you should memorize that will help you tremendously in this whole process. The first is memorize amboy. Okay? That helps you with the conjunctions. Second, I'm going to give you an acronym for the prepositions. All right? I'll explain that one later, but I call it a with boot. All right? Because that covers the most common prepositions: at, with, in, from, for, by, of, on, and to. All right? If you memorize those 9 prepositions, that's a large percentage of the prepositions. Not all of them. There's 150 English prepositions, by the way. Did you know that? 150. Come on. See what I mean? English is horrible. But at least if you memorize these 9, I don't know what percentage that is, but it's a large group of prepositions usually fall under one of these 9. So it's helpful to memorize that. And then finally, you're going to want to memorize these relative pronouns. Okay? Just 3. Because if you memorize those 3, there are several others that are connected to them. Because technically it's whom, whoever, whichever. So there's a bunch of them, but notice that what's in common is that word who is in this one, who is in this one, which is in this one. So if you memorize these 3, you pretty much capture all relative pronouns. Okay? So basically what I'm telling you is memorize. You don't have to memorize all of the conjunctions and all of the pronouns and all the prepositions. I'm telling you, just memorize these essentially 5, 9, 14, 17 words. 17 English words, and that will give you a bulk of the connector words used in the English language. All right? So memorize these 17 words, basically. And the first will be the conjunctions, and boy. And that's this and boy is really powerful. Because then you know, okay, those are the coordinating ones, so I know any other conjunction subordinating. And even the correlatives, I know, even though there's another word in there, I know if it's coordinating or not because it'll have an and boy in it. All right, the second group is the prepositions. And again, I just call it a with boot because I don't know what a with boot is, but I couldn't think of a better acronym. But these 9 prepositions encompass a good portion of the 150. In fact, I think the words in, of, and was it on or 2 or 4? I think it's 4. I think these are the 3 of the top 10 words used in English. But in any case, these 9 prepositions really form a majority of the prepositions that are used in Scripture. And then finally, relative pronouns, just memorize 3 of them and you essentially have the whole group. There's a few derivations, but they all contain either who or which. Okay? So this is gold, guys, right here. You memorize those. That's going to help you tremendously with the connector words. And as we've seen, knowing those connector words are really helpful in doing the diagram, which means they're helpful in seeing how did all the phrases and clauses connect with each other within a given sentence or paragraph. Okay. Now, we do have those cases, as we saw one example tonight, or this morning, of a connector word that's not there. And so we have to, you know, look at other things in the context and think about the passage to guide and direct us a little bit. But still, for the most part, you know, 90% of the cases or 80% of the cases, we're going to have connector words that serve as our guides. And sometimes the punctuation is helpful. All right, so let's see. Any questions on that? I honestly think, you know, obviously with another language, you're doing a lot of memory work, but really it's being strategic about what you memorize. You know, I put together a list, and I'll give it to you, of a bunch of prepositions and conjunctions. I gave you links to websites. Like I said, there's over 150 English prepositions. I give you a website link where you can go and look, and you can find them all. You know, those of you that are strange guys that like to know all the special details, and I want to read and memorize all the prepositions in the English language. Well, okay, but most of us regular people, that just is beyond what we can comprehend. So what we need to do is let's memorize a few, the key ones, but then also let's look for patterns or clues within the sentence that will tell us, okay, what that word is doing, like we just did for the conjunctions, where we look for, okay, what follows it? Okay, that gives me a clue as to the word that introduces it. So, for example, anyone competes follows if. That tells me anyone competes. That's a subject verb. That's telling me something about the word if. Even though I didn't memorize whether if's a conjunction or a preposition or relative pronoun or is a participle, I didn't memorize any of that. I know, I have an idea what it is just by knowing what follows it. What is it introducing? All right, so this is how I think, in my opinion, this is the way to help work through, even if you don't have a list of things memorized. That's okay. Memorize a few things because that'll get you started. But then a lot of other things you can work your way through, as we done tonight. Okay? Let me see if I want to. Let's why don't we just stop there? I think this is enough information for this morning. All right. We'll do some more passages together, and as we do that, each passage usually introduces something new for us to think about. But also we can keep practicing these procedures and keep working at it. All right. In the meantime, men, I would encourage you, suggest that you memorize these 17 words in their categories. So first, the conjunctions. Okay, and, boy, and, nor, but, or, yet. Okay, for prepositions, I want to memorize a with boot. At, with, in, from, for, by, on, of, to. And then for relative pronouns, I want to memorize who, which, and that. All right, and that's it. And then, like for participles, you don't memorize participles. What you'll do is you'll notice the pattern. A participle, right, generally is a verb with an ing ending. Not always. Sometimes there's ed ending, and that not always is that the case. When we'll look at when we connect the participles, we'll see, okay, how do I tell if it's a participle or a regular verb? All right, we'll talk about that. There are other special problems with the word to. There's special problems with the word, with the preposition and the verbs. And so there's some special cases we'll get to, but a good starting point, that'll give you good footing to move forward is memorize these words and try to keep in mind how we can identify what kind of connector word we have based on what follows it. Okay? All right. Last opportunity for question or comment for this morning.
Pastor Tim.
Yes, sir.
Pastor, I'd like to ask a question about Romans 4:25.
About
Because Romans the
okay.
verse in Romans 4:25.
Okay.
Because it says Jesus Christ died for our Jesus was delivered over for our trespasses, but was raised for our justification. But NASB translates the word for as because. And I looked up in the interlinear. It is a preposition, but because it's a conjunction, right? So the NASB translates it as a conjunction.
Okay.
And the meaning is, I think the meaning is really changed.
So what we're looking at here, I've got the Greek text on the side here. I don't have interlinear, but open. So yeah, that word because, and it's used twice, right? Because. If I look at the Greek text, the interlinear is going to tell me that it's a preposition. Dia. Okay? Now, we can have prepositions that function like the word because. There are prepositions that can mean the same thing conjunctions can mean. All right? It's just prepositions introduce nouns. Conjunctions introduce clauses. That's the general distinction between them. But a preposition, for example, the word for. Oh, you don't see it. The word for can act like a conjunction or a preposition. In other words, the word for can introduce a noun, which is what prepositions do, or it can introduce a clause, which is what subordinating conjunctions do. And in both cases, that word for means because or for the purpose of. So even if it's acting like a conjunction, or if it's acting like a preposition, they can still have the same meaning. And so here, that preposition dia has the idea of on account of, or because of, or as a result of. All right? So because is actually a good translation here of dia. The ESV used the word for. Okay, now in English, for has the idea of because, reason. It's semantically, it means the same thing. It's just that it's technically in English a preposition here because look what follows it. What follows the word for there? Brother Harris?
It's our trespasses.
Yeah, what is that? That's a noun. So therefore, the connector word is going to be a preposition.
Yeah.
And the same here. For justification. Justification is a noun. So therefore, it's going to be introduced by a preposition.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that the preposition can still functions as a reason. Or he was delivered up on account of, or because of, or for our trespasses. The idea of why answers the question why, or the reason. most
Yeah,
likely.
yeah, thank you, Pastor Tim. But would for be a better translation than
Yeah, I think so, because is not. I don't think because is used like as a preposition in English. I can't think of an example. So but for is. Here's why this matters.
Yeah, it is.
Let's do this. Jesus our Lord. Okay. Let me go here. Take you back. Let's close that. All right. All right, so we have Jesus Christ our Lord, verse 25. And here, by the way, we have this connector word. And because I memorized it, right? I memorized who. I know this connector word is a relative pronoun. And as we'll find out in the future, it's followed by a clause. All right? It always introduces an independent clause. Okay, I'm just diagramming this real quick. All right. So this prepositional phrase, and again, I know it's a preposition because what follows it is a noun, not a clause. So I know this is a preposition, and it's giving me the reason. Okay? And because we're dealing with English here, that for is a better word to use than because. Because introduces clauses. It's a conjunction. All right? Now, in terms of meaning, because is still giving the right idea as far as meaning, but it's actually the wrong word to use as far as grammatically, because it's not a conjunction here. As you noted, and you found in the interlinear, it's a preposition, which introduces this. And yes, it should be a preposition. Why? Because the Greek grammar follows the English grammar or English follows the Greek grammar as far as the fact that prepositions introduce a noun. Conjunctions, subordinating conjunctions, introduce a clause. All right, so as far as interpretation, Harris, no difference, in my opinion. And I haven't studied this verse probably as much as you have, but just in looking at it, generally speaking, the word for as a preposition carries the idea for the purpose of, or on account of, or because of. That's what it means. So using the word because gives the idea that it's, the basis of he was delivered up. Why? Because of our transgressions. But grammatically speaking, that's a poorer choice to use, because the word because is not a preposition in English, as far as I know. Does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, thank you, Pastor Tim.
Okay. Do you guys understand that? That makes sense? So yeah, if we look at the translations, the ESV, I think, uses the word for. The NIV says he was delivered over to death for our sins and was raised for, so it uses the word for. The New King James uses because of. and the NAS says because of. Now, notice it says because of. Ah, you know what? That's why it's a prep. Okay. All right.
Okay, so it becomes a preposition.
Yeah.
because-
So because is a conjunction, technically subordinating. For is a preposition or a conjunction, right? Depending on what follows. So here it can be used as a preposition. I think because of is a preposition. See what I mean about English, right? I mean, it's I think that's the deal. Let me see, let me confirm that real quick. And then I'll let you guys go. Oh, by the way, you guys, did I show you this last week? You think you're suffering, right, from all this English grammar? So I'm the teacher here, so I got to study this stuff too, even though it's my first language. So I got to get books like this. So look how thick this book is, guys. You're making me have to read all this garbage, you know, to figure out. So let me look up because of in this book. See, I get, even though I'm an English speaker, I get nosebleeds too, all right? Yeah. Yeah, there it is. Okay, I don't know if you can see this. Because of, there it is. And then it says here that preposition. Because by itself is a conjunction. So that's how the New American Standard got away with it. Is they actually use a because of functions as a preposition. Probably since we have the word of in there. I don't know. That's kind of.
Yeah, thank you, Pastor Tim. That's what I wondered, because how come the translators translated a preposition into a conjunction, but now because of your because of your explanation.
So you need to get this book, guys. So you can suffer with me, like Paul says, right? Suffer as a good soldier with me. So you need to suffer with me, or I'll make you suffer. Maybe I'll just start reading pages out of this during our time. Anyway,
Pastor Tim, give us the title and the author so that some of the guys might order it on Amazon.
Yeah, it's actually a helpful book. It's kind of like a dictionary almost for English. And so like I just did, I just looked up a because of, and it gave the information. I'll just hold it up for you, and I'll try to remember to put it on the Facebook group. But it's called A to Z of English Grammar and Usage by Jeffrey Leach. This book came recommended to me as sort of a good reference tool. It doesn't teach English grammar per se, but if you want to know, like, okay, infinitives, what were those again? And you can go here and it'll give you an explanation with an example of infinitive. And it'll have like all the prepositions in here. So one thing you could do, like Jonathan had that question about unless. I mean, another option is if I have a book like this, I can look up the word unless. Oh boy, and let's see. Notice what it says. Okay, the word unless, I don't know if you can see this right here. Jonathan, can you see it? What does it say?
It's blur.
Oh, it's too blurry. Can you see it now?
It's blur, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'll read it. It says subordinating conjunction.
Sorry.
That's okay. So, you know, it does say here subordinating conjunction. So it's a good reference, actually, for this kind of thing. Let me see. Let me challenge this. So I'm going to look up something more challenging here. Prepositional verbs. Ha. Well, what do you know? Yeah. I just got this book about a week ago, so I'm just getting familiar with it, but I really like it. I got it for I got it on Amazon used for about like $8, 400 pesos, something like that. So that's not bad, huh? I don't know if you can still get it for that price and if they'll deliver it to you in the Philippines, but I think it's a helpful resource for this whole thing, especially if you know now like what a subordinating conjunction is. You can reckon, oh, subordinating conjunction, I know what that does. That introduces dependent clauses. That means this is subordinate to something else. It's modifying something else. So these can become very powerful tools when you understand sort of how the grammar's working. So you know what a subordinating conjunction is, you know what a preposition is, things like that. Okay.
But there's an assurance, Pastor Tim, that the English grammar functions as the Greek.
For the most part.
Because that is, okay. So we cannot rely entirely on that material.
No, I mean, English, it's a translation, so it has its limits. But it's, you know, as I've said before, that the English language, you know, Latin and grammar were sort of, you know, they're comparable in a lot of ways. English comes from Latin, so the grammar is similar. So when we understand English grammar, that is a step closer to Greek grammar. So Greek uses prepositions in a similar way as English. It uses conjunctions in a similar way as English does. There are subordinating conjunctions in Greek, coordinating conjunctions in Greek. There are participles in Greek that function similarly to those in English. Greek's more precise, actually. The rules are cleaner. English has a lot of, like this because of. It's like you take because, add of, now you have a preposition. It's not a conjunction anymore. Well, that's baloney. But in Greek, it's very clear. It's a preposition. Dia always acts like a preposition. And we know what prepositions do in English, and they do a similar thing in Greek. They introduce, they connect nouns. All right? So
that can be helpful in understanding the translation.
Yes.
The English translation of the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm no expert in all languages in the world, but I think English has, at this point in time in history, there's been so much effort in English to do in biblical scholarship that the English translations we have are really good. They're not perfect, but they're really good. And so studying the English, since you already have a basis of English in your understanding, it takes you a step closer to the Greek. Now, ideally, study Koine Greek. But if you're not able to do that, the English text is good. The other thing is, if you learn English grammar well, when you study Greek, because the grammar is similar, it'll actually help you a lot in studying Greek. Because when you're in a Greek class and they say, okay, today we're going to look at participles. Well, if you already know what those are in English, boy, that's going to help you in Greek. In Greek, you're just going to then be working on, okay, how do I recognize a Greek participle? And actually, they're very easy to spot in Greek. Much easier in Greek than English, honestly. Because English has that ing ending, but that can be used for regular verbs too, but not in Greek. Greek has a special, the way the verbs end, you know it's a participle. There's no question. So Greek's a lot easier in that regard. It's easier to identify. Just like you saw, Harris, in this passage in Romans, dia. That's a preposition in Greek. There's no question. In English, we have a little trouble because they use the word because. But we know it's a preposition in Greek. So the way the Greek words are formed is a more, it's not as confusing as English. I'll put it that way. All right. So all that to say is that learning all this stuff in English is really moving on the same path in understanding Greek, honestly. It's not like if you study Greek, it's like a whole different set of grammar rules and a whole different set of how things work in that language. Now, Hebrew, there are differences from English, because Hebrew is a Semitic language. It's from a totally different family of languages. So it's going to have its own challenges there. But still, English grammar will be a helpful bridge towards studying Hebrew as well. In my opinion, that's just my opinion, in my experience with it. But I think I've told you guys before, I really didn't learn English grammar very well until I studied Greek. Because I really didn't pay attention in school. Then I got to Greek, and he's bringing up all these terms, all these conjunctions, prepositions, participles, and I'm like, what's a participle? I never heard of that before, because I wasn't paying attention in my high school English class, because grammar stinks. But now that I'm studying scripture, I'm like, no, grammar is kind of important. It's the key tool in unlocking meaning. So I think this is, it's hard though, and it's tedious and it's painful, especially if it's not your first language. But even as a first language, it's no fun either, guys. So, but yet, as we uncover what's going on, like I showed you before in that verse, when just knowing what kinds of conjunctions they were told us a lot about the meaning of the text, at least how things connected. So the grammar is a powerful tool if you know it. All right. Hopefully that answered your question, Brother Harris, and thanks for asking.
Yeah, Pastor. Thank you very much for answering.
No more question. No more question.
All right, no more. We're done. Y'all, it's past lunchtime. You're hungry? All right, brothers. Well, I again just want to commend you for your diligence. I know you could be doing a lot of things today and every week, and just taking the time to study these things, that really encourages me that you're really want to try to understand the scriptures as best you can, and I know the Lord will bless that effort. Okay, and appreciate your guys' example to me in that. So let me see who. Pastor Entz, if you're still there, would you mind closing us in prayer?
Yes, sir. I'm still here. I'm
okay, great.
Listening very intently.
Okay, good. Can you
pray.
close us in prayer?
Yes, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father,